Die gemeinsame und grenzüberschreitende Arbeit zur Vermittlung von digitalen Kompetenzen in Europa ist unerlässlich. Es liegt noch ein Stück Weg vor uns, bevor wir die europäischen Ziele bis 2030 erreichen. Ich freue mich aber besonders, dass wir dazu heute auch mit internationalen Gästen diskutieren. Bevor wir dann intensiv auf unser Bildungssystem hier in Deutschland schauen, habe ich aber noch ein paar Programmhinweise für Sie. Im Mittelpunkt heute steht die digitale Aus- und Weiterbildung, die Bedeutung von Diversity in der IT, die Zukunftskompetenzen für den Arbeitsmarkt von morgen und insbesondere beschäftigen wir uns auch damit, wie immersive Technologien und künstliche Intelligenz die Aus- und Weiterbildung revolutionieren. In den unterschiedlichen Sessions wird es darum gehen, welche Best Practices zur Vermittlung digitaler Kompetenzen bestehen, wie wir Mädchen und Frauen empowern und mehr Diversität in die IT bringen, wie wir das Ausbildungspersonal von heute und von morgen schulen und wie wir unsere Berufsschulen zu Zukunftswerkstätten machen. Wir schauen uns außerdem an, wie KI funktioniert und wie wir Prüfungen digital umsetzen können. Wir gehen der Frage nach, welche Future Skills wir für den Arbeitsmarkt brauchen und welche Kompetenzen die Twin Transition unterstützen. Dieses abwechslungsreiche Programm können Sie auch heute wieder auf unseren 2 Bühnen verfolgen. Hier auf der Education Stage und nebenan auf der Innovation Stage. Dort startet das Programm heute gleich um 10:15 Uhr mit einer Live-Vorstellung des neuen nationalen Online-Portals für berufliche Weiterbildung MeinNow. Die Erkenntnisse aus dem Vortrag werden dann auch direkt im Panel diskutiert. Das startet um 10:35 Uhr und trägt den Titel Berufliche Perspektiven gestalten, Navigation durch die Weiterbildungsgalaxie mit MeinNow. Außerdem haben wir heute für Sie 4 Workshops im Programm. Der erste Workshop trägt den Titel Win-Win für alle, in Zukunft klischeefrei, von Christoph Kröger von der Initiative Klischeefrei und dieser startet um 11:45 Uhr. Im Programmreiter auf der Plattform können Sie sich ganz einfach für die Workshops anmelden. Und nun habe ich noch ein paar technische Hinweise für Sie, bevor es dann mit unserer ersten Panel-Diskussion losgeht. Sollten Sie bei der Verwendung der Plattform Fragen haben oder Hilfe benötigen, klicken Sie oben rechts auf den Pfeil neben Ihrem Profil und gehen Sie auf App Support kontaktieren. Wir machen um 12:25 Uhr hier auf der Education Stage und auf der Innovation Stage eine Pause. Damit aber keine Langeweile aufkommt, haben wir auch in der Pause einen Workshop für Sie eingeplant, Deutschland sicher im Netz, digitaler Führerschein von Elisabeth Wisniewski. Er startet um 12:30 Uhr. Wir freuen uns auch sehr, wenn Sie sich auch heute wieder aktiv einbringen. Unter den Menüpunkten Community und Gruppenchat haben Sie die Gelegenheit zu netzwerken und sich mit anderen Teilnehmenden zu vernetzen. Während der Programmpunkte können Sie sich auch aktiv beteiligen. Das hat gestern schon sehr gut funktioniert. Fragen können Sie direkt im Chat neben dem Stream stellen und unsere Moderatorinnen und Moderatoren werden versuchen, diese einzubinden. Wenn Sie in den sozialen Medien mitdiskutieren wollen, verwenden Sie auch heute gerne wieder den Hashtag Bildung24. Hier bleiben wir jetzt aber international und wagen den Blick über die deutschen Grenzen hinaus in unsere Nachbarländer und in Drittstaaten. Was können wir von anderen lernen? Wie schaffen wir es gemeinsam, den digitalen Wandel voranzubringen? Welche Best Practices lassen sich auf andere Länder übertragen? Die Moderation übernimmt meine Kollegin Sabrina Caroli. Sie ist Head of Brussels Office in der EU-Repräsentanz von Bitkom und ist mir digital aus Brüssel zugeschaltet. We will be switching to English. The stage is yours, Sabrina.
Thank you very much, Nora, and also good morning from my side. As it was already said, during the next 45 minutes, we will take a closer look at the European Euroskills with our excellent panelists, whom I will introduce in a second. I would like to start with Ms. Terras. She is the Ambassador at Large for Education in the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She has 25 years of diplomatic experience in organizations such as NATO, the EU, OPCW, and ICC. Her background is in pedagogy and European studies, and she also has a professional experience as a teacher, so I think it's very suited for the discussion today. Thank you very much for being here. Our next panelist is Egbert Holthuisv, who is the head of unit at the Directorate General for Employment, Social Affairs and Inclusion at the European Commission. In this function, he monitors employment and social policies and the implementation of the European Social Fund and Fund in Germany, Austria, Slovenia, and Croatia. In July 2021, he also became deputy to the Director for Jobs and Skills. And prior to joining the European Commission, he worked for the Netherlands Organization for Applied Scientific Research and the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So a warm welcome to you too. And finally, I also would like to warmly welcome our last panelist, Alessandro Brolpito, who works as the Digital Skills and Learning Senior Specialist at the ETF. In this capacity, he analyzes and practices in ETF's partner countries to support the development of digital skills and digitally innovative teaching and learning practice in a lifelong learning perspective. He graduated in computer science and has over 20 years of experience in the private and the EU public sector. So also thank you for being here today. In her video message, Commissioner Ivanova has mentioned the ambitious targets for 2030 and emphasized that also shared ownership will play a crucial role in achieving them. Looking at the current figures, and she also mentioned that, it is clear that we need to accelerate our efforts to address the estimated shortage of 8 million of ICT specialists by 2030. So as really a short, small warm-up question to just dive into the topic, I would like to know from your side, how optimistic are you that we will meet these targets in time? Maybe we can start with Ms. Terras then.
Talking about the ICT specialist, I think it will be easily achievable when the digital skills and ICT is just a normal, basic, general part of our education. So I don't see here impossible challenge. So it's the question of purpose.
Very optimistic perspective. Maybe Mr. Holthuisv, you can also contribute to that.
Yes, thanks, Sabrina. Thanks to Bitkom organizing this in the context of the European Year of Skills. I'm also quite optimistic. The fact that we discuss it now today, that we have so many member states already being front runner on and sometimes even exceeding the target, shows that we have plenty of best practices to rely on to support those member states that are still lagging behind. But there is European funding available, there is European policy frameworks available. So Sabrina, I'm also quite optimistic. And anyway, we have to reach the targets because our main competitors, United States and some of our other competitors, are not sitting still. So we have to set up the challenge and make this target a success. Thank you.
And maybe now to Alessandro, yeah.
Well, let's say I'm quite neutral and not so much optimistic, but we can do it, but we need to speed up a bit. Of course, digital skills are really important for a long-term sustainable growth and competitiveness. But if we look to the report on the state of the digital decade recently published, let's say, considering the targets that were also in the commissioner video, they are quite, we are still struggling a bit. We should speed up a bit our progress, I would say, in terms of basic digital skills and as well as in terms of a more gender balanced participation in the ICT specialist position. We are really losing talents if we are not able to attract women in this ICT professional. And so this is, of course, I believe we set the right target. We have a monitoring system in place, a robust one. We probably need to speed up in order to, let's say.
Nevertheless, I think it's a really good start to dive into the discussion with such an optimistic picture, at least on digital skills. I would like to stay with you, Mr. Brolpito. As I mentioned in the beginning, you're working for the ETF, and I think when it comes to digital skills, it's also good that the EU is leading by example. So I think in that sense, it was also nice to hear a bit more about your opinion on where we stand at the moment. But I'm not, our audience may not be familiar with the ETF. So it would be great, I think, if you also could briefly introduce the agency and its activities and what kind of role digital literacy plays in it, so that we can maybe, based on that, start into the rest of the discussion.
In a few words, ETF, the European Training Foundation, my organization, is an agency of the European Union. So we work in close collaboration with the EU institution, in particular with the European Commission. We work in the framework of the external relation. So it means that we look at the countries, for example, that are surrounding the European Union. And specifically, we focus on human capital development overall. And specifically, as you well introduced myself, I'm focusing on the digital skills provision and overall on the digitalization of education and training system. Now, if we take an international perspective, which is my perspective that I can bring in this panel, for sure, Europe together can really make, let's say, important, let's say, step forward, as we were mentioning before, in terms of basic digital skill provision. And this is clearly a very important matter in terms of inclusion and equity and rights in the virtual environments, for example, if we are going in this direction. Internationally, we can learn a lot. Of course, there are many important examples in the EU partner countries, but also global. With taking a global perspective, we have to be aware that there are other approaches, other, let's say, important reality. So I think very much that, for example, thinking to the ETF partner countries, we look also to their specific cases, because there are lessons always that we can share. I'm thinking, for example, to the candidate countries that are going to join the Union, so will be in the future member states as well. So they are struggling sometimes, but we have also good practices in this respect. So my message would be, let's say, let's keep always a very broad perspective for something that is it's clearly a global and mega trend that is not affecting just the EU member states.
Thank you very much for that global perspective already on it. From that point, I would like to go back a bit more to the European Union, to you, Mr. Holthuisv. Mr. Brolpito already mentioned that human capital. I think that is also something we have always to think, right? Like digitalization of the education system just for the reason of digitization will not bring any benefit for us. And to be successful in the digital age, human capital needs to have a certain skills and qualities. So my question would be, how well are education and labor market policies already linked? And how can we ensure that education system keeps pace with the technological progress and the needs of the labor market?
Yeah, thanks, Sabrina. That's indeed a very important question. And in order to address the question, I think we would look at the different roles at EU level and national competences. Since you're talking about education and training policy is foremost a national competence. So what the EU position is that we need to try to provide policy guidance to member states to equip people with digital skills, and then secondly, have the tools and networks to support member states in that objective. And then three, and I mentioned already in the introduction, provide financial support to the development of digital skills through EU funding. But our ambition at the EU level to support member states, it's indeed to pursue digital policies to empower both people and businesses. So we have to look at it from the people side, from young people and people in work already, and the business side. So our approach is sustainable and having a more prosperous digital future. And on the education part, there's the Digital Education Action Plan. And in that, Sabrina, we set concrete measures to support the development of digital skills and the adaptation of education and training system of member states to the digital age. But you're obviously right. I mean, businesses have to identify which kind of skills and including digital skills are needed for the transformation of their business. So this interaction with businesses, and I hope the business world is also actively taking part in this Bitkom conference, is super important, super important. Thank you.
a quick follow-up to that. So you mentioned that also like the business perspective has to be included in building up these skills. How can we ensure that actually their voice is also heard? Like, I mean, we have associations, obviously, but is maybe the Commission also planning on maybe closer engage also businesses to discover what kind of digital skills are needed in the future? Because I think it's also a bit like looking in a crystal ball. We don't know yet, right? We have a specific like we have an assumption, but how can we really ensure that we be on track?
Indeed, I think if you talk about the bigger companies, for them it is relatively clear where they source their staff and their future staff, and they know what the needs are. Here we are looking in particular small and medium-sized enterprises, where almost 45% says that skill shortages hold their company back in adopting or using digital technologies. And the concept of the European Year of Skills has clearly been to reach out to small and medium-sized enterprises, and the projects, and we will perhaps talk a little bit later about some best practices examples. And we have a few. For example, in Denmark, we have a project, Digital Leadership Culture, where we aim to strengthen the digital competences of managers and key employees in a big number of small and medium-sized enterprises. With kind of this new expertise, I mean, they can run their business better. So we have this to have this direct link with small and medium-sized enterprises and see where the support is they need. And I think we have a couple of good examples in that context, Sabrina.
I'm very curious to hear more about that specific examples later. But before we go there, I would like to look a bit closer to Estonia, because Estonia is far ahead of countries in the PISA results, for example, but also in like the report of the Digital Decade. It's quite ahead. So it's a clear sign that digital learning creates a positive output. So why are I think we kind of know already why it's important, but why is maybe Estonia so ahead? And what has been your guiding approach to achieving this success story?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for the question. And first, I also want to join and say that this conference is really very timely and it has been very interesting. So I followed it also yesterday a little bit, and I really appreciate the discussions Bitkom is now giving the platform for. So talking with digitalization in Estonia, so it has been a long story because we started our journey in the mid-90s in a very targeted policy of digitalizing our public services. So I'm not, in the overall attitude of the population to the digitalized services and to the ICT solutions is very positive, in general speaking, not in absolute terms, that's for sure. And that has made it really, that has created a really very supportive environment also for the digitalization in education, because education is not as it's not outside your life. I mean, education must be part of our society. It must prepare our students, our young people fit for the adult life, and to be also fit for lifelong learning. I mean, we're not talking only about the primary or education, we are talking also about the lifelong learning. And there, in this perspective, maybe the digitalization in education becomes even more important. But it's true, talking about the digital skills, that it's a little bit like a moving target, because the development is always 1 or 2 steps ahead of what you learn or teach at schools. But therefore, we don't talk about that maybe so much about, I mean, we talk about the skills, but it's also that you need to have competencies. So basically, digital competencies, meaning that you must have the skills for problem solving. for example, for communication, for collaborating with the others. So it's not only about having an ICT technical solution, it's everything around it, that why you are using it and how you are using it. So why the question was that why is it important for Estonia? I think we have profited a lot. Also, the accessibility of services, the accessibility of education, and also as our teachers. I mean, in our school system, the curriculum is basically describing the learning outcomes, but the teachers are really autonomous how they reach the outcomes. So therefore, they just have more tools in hand available how to reach their learning outcomes. So by law, all our textbooks, the study literature, everything must be digitalized, and that's what we have done. Plus, of course, a very thorough long-term nudging of pushing teachers to training. That's also the teachers' training and the constant development. So it has been a very long journey, and maybe in education we started to put more emphasis and more systematic programs and activities more than 10 years ago. So in the beginning of the 2012, for example, the Proga Tiger was launched, which really started to popularize ICT programming and cybersecurity, starting from the kindergarten age till the adult age. So it's across the educational landscape, and this has been made, by the way, with the support of the European Social Fund. So it has been a constant, systematic, and thorough work in that direction. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have maybe a quick follow-up. You mentioned that you work on that kind of digitalization of the education system since the 90s. So you're really a pace setter here. I would be also interested in, because we were talking about your approach, why it is like that, and how you also make constant progress. But why do you think Estonia was so open to do that in the first place?
I think in the 90s, when we regained the independence, we were just so poor. And somehow there are several reasons. The ICT or the e-services looked like a good, modern, quick, and maybe also cheaper solution to provide public services. But you need to have a political leadership. So we had a very, very strong political leadership in the end of 90s. We started this Tiger Leap program. Basically, in the beginning of millennium, all our schools had internet connection, computer classes. So it was that was a political decision, and it was not only working the public, but it was public-private endeavor. So basically, the private sector had to be on board, also in education, while providing the solutions for the schools.
Is a perfect, for me, a perfect transition now to first Mr. Holthuisv, because we heard now a good best practice from Estonia. We heard that also social funds from the European Union helped to actually achieve the progress in the system. We heard that political leadership is needed. So maybe it would be very nice, like you mentioned it also in your comment in the beginning, that the Commission they have a supporting role. But maybe you can already mention maybe how these different actions can contribute to achieving the targets, how we can maybe also make the member states ready to take on this political leadership that is apparently needed to get maybe the digital skills right to to function. And maybe you can also do that maybe based on some best practices, because I think you may already can share some best practices where we can see that member states understand that this kind of political leadership, that this kind of private investment is needed, and that the Commission can help to share these examples.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina. I mean, on the leadership and the fact that the need for digital skills is so widely discussed now is also due to a very active role of the European Commission, and we heard the Commissioner talking about why digital skills are vital for innovation, jobs, and European competitiveness. Why we think that EU firms are rapidly gaining on their US peers in the use of advanced technologies, but that we are still trailing behind in digital innovation. Why digital technologies are skills are so important to meeting ambitious goals of the European Green Deal. So this is at the highest level in the member states and in Europe, the European Commission. We know how crucially important having digital skills is. And then, as you say, we have this big mismatch between the supply of digital skills and the demand for digital skills, in particular also for small and medium-sized enterprises. And this holds back the opportunities which we have with the digital transition. As was said also, this requires us to have very close attention on the shortage of digital experts and how we can meet the target of 20 million IT experts as soon as possible and latest by 2030. And as was already stated by my colleagues, there's a high potential still among women. Women are underrepresented, as we know, in tech-related studies, so we have to work on that. We also have to improve the free movement of IT technicians, and I think the concept which we had behind the European Digital Skills Certificate, this would be important to help to recognize digital skills quickly and easily by employers or training providers across the EU. And here we have a pilot. Austria and Spain, France, among others, are part of this, and this can inspire other member states also to work on the digital skills recognition and certification through the European Social Fund. You mentioned it already. I mean, in Denmark, we have a project to support digital skills competencies in small and medium-sized enterprises, but also, for example, in Greece, digital skills should not be an elite. Digital skills should be based also and available also for young people, unemployed, people with relatively low skills. And in Greece, this work experience program in digital marketing shows how enthusiastic young people are in the uptake of digital skills. And this really improves their job prospects, and it can also then help filling this huge gap for digital experts. And then in Luxembourg also we have this digital challenge where we try to ensure collaboration and cooperation between young people and companies to help them understand both sides, what is needed, what kind of skills are needed. And then, of course, again on the leadership, it all depends on the commitment of member states to, in particular, those lagging behind, to get close to reaching these targets. And we will do, and Alessandro mentioned it already, close monitoring it, and we will have regular reporting on that. And I really hope that these reports, also for those member states that show where there are still bottlenecks to reaching these targets, that together we will be able to meet these targets and then help each other out through European funding, best practices, and then I think we are on a very good way, Sabrina. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I can actually assure you, especially the Digital Decade report, I think was very helpful for Germany to realize that we have in specific areas some gaps, that we are in specific areas also good, but that we also have some homeworks to do. Maybe a quick follow-up, because also Ms. Terras mentioned that infrastructure is also kind of important. I mean, we can talk about digitalization for like digital skills, but if the schools have no access to infrastructure, it will probably not happen. So like maybe one question is more like now related, how can how can Commission support also countries to member states to work on that, so that the whole system, the whole ecosystem is actually leading towards the same target. And then I was just wondering, because I believe it must be hard to also get the best, to share the best practices, to get it also to the SMEs, because we mentioned that for SMEs it is very difficult. You mentioned that there's this certificate now in place. How can maybe like the political side, but also industry, help to share that there is something out there that we could use? Because I always have the feeling that there's so many nice things happening on the EU level, but the communication down to like the level where it's needed, we all have to do a bit more there. We have to join our forces and to really raise awareness for these initiatives.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right there. I mean, and we saw during the COVID pandemic how poorly equipped many schools and training institutions were to work in a virtual environment. And this also led the Commission, together with member states, in the context of the Recovery and Resilience Facility, to pay and to support the digital transformation, including in schools, with substantial investments in digital skills and education. Because you're right, everything starts with training, schooling, vocational educational training. Also there we have the Erasmus Plus program that supports the work on digital skills and of course, but of course there's a pivotal role for the trainers and for the teaching staff, and for them, they first need to develop the technical skills and needed, and they need to be motivated to work in partly in virtual reality environments in classrooms. So first focus is indeed supporting the educational system to cope with this challenge. On working together with member states, and I mentioned already, I think the Commission has put in place different initiatives and tools to support member states. I mean, we have the large-scale partnerships in digital ecosystems, which will help member states to sit together and work together. And of course, you're right. I mean, for small and medium-sized enterprises, often they don't have time to sit together in these kinds of meetings. So what we need is ecosystems, also regional ecosystems, where training institutions, small and medium-sized enterprises, work together. Let's not forget the role of informal training and informal context in that context.
Okay. Yeah, we had like, I think, a bit of a sound issue, but I think I got everything. Yeah, maybe from there to you, Mr. Brolpito, because like you said you're like closely working with candidates, with the candidates like within the enlargement process. So could you maybe also share some best practices there where you think like there's a good advancement, and maybe also how, like, what role or what kind of challenges do you see these member states, like these like candidate states, usually have in changing their education system? Do they have the similar challenges, or is it a bit different?
I mean, the challenges are very similar. The solution, not always the same solution. But there are some elements that are really, really important, I would say almost everywhere. For example, if I remember, we remember the previous interventions, it was mentioned the leadership. But something that was also mentioned is about autonomy of schools, because and not only of the schools, but also of the teachers. So this is normally the multi-level governance. It's something that helps. And where we work in the candidate countries, they come normally from very centralized services. So in all type of governance, let's say education and training system, there are pros and cons. But definitely to properly face the digitalization, we need an ecosystem, as it was mentioned, for formal education and also for adult education, for small, medium enterprises, to allow them to really make progress in this respect. Alone, they can't do it, to be honest. So let's say we need a mix of top-down and bottom-up approaches. And in this way, you ensure you create the ecosystem. And of course, these are at the state level. And let's say at the bottom-up level, we need really to look at opportunity, to give the freedom to really apply the situated solution that is necessary to face a specific context. The contextualization of the digitalization is paramount. So what I can tell you from the other countries, there are countries that, let's say, for example, in Montenegro, it's a candidate countries. If we look to the Eurostat, they are quite aligned with the EU average level of basic digital skills, for example, and they are really making important, let's say, reforms in order not only to have the centralized system that now has in education, for the Ministry of Education, for example, a small department, it's small, but is in charge of the digitalization across level and sectors. This is very important because it was mentioned, for example, the reform of the curricula is important, it's paramount. We need to do it, and it's a moving target, as it was said. Now we have we need to introduce everywhere a literacy, for example. We know that we have a lot of progress. We need to prepare our students, our pupils in this respect, but this is also changing the workplace, and therefore also the adult learning it's paramount, because otherwise we really exclude people, and this is in terms of competitiveness of our economy, it's a big issue. So there are important, let's say, examples where things are moving ahead. I mentioned Montenegro. I could also speak about Serbia, that they are making good progress. But let's say, what I can tell you from my experience on the ground is that what the EU is offering in terms of frameworks, for example, in terms of tools to support even bottom-up initiatives, like for example, the use of some tool to develop the digital capacity of the schools at school level, because the leadership is important also in the school leader in the school, allowing the teacher to innovate and experiment, to bring in blended learning, for example. So I have to say that as a EU agency, we look at the new recommendation to this new EU tools developed, and this can really support these changes. So there are good practices where I see that the EU support in the framework of their own national initiative, combined together, they can bring good changes even in the provision of digital skills.
Thank you very much. I really actually liked also that you mentioned that there's also freedom in every sense, like freedom for the teachers, maybe freedom also for member states to explore. That is quite crucial to maybe also have that kind of ownership that is needed to progress. However, I would be also a bit curious about maybe any concerns these that were mentioned maybe in the projects you're working on? Because I mean, we see it here in Europe. I think some technologies I mentioned, like just AI, I mean, they also meet some concerns. Do you have like similar experience across the border?
Yes, I mean, there is always a tension between point to achieve excellence and inclusion, for example. This is something that, well, if you want to bring in some advanced technologies, I was mentioning to AI, but we could also refer to the virtual environment. That, for example, the simulation tools in vocational education and training, and in Germany, for example, this is with the dual system. It's a very interesting and concrete example on how it works. The partnership between the public and the private, to me, this is a very good. It's not always possible to export it, let's say, but it's as an excellent example. But there are definitely challenges. And this is the complexity of the digitalization. You run the major risk is the lack of inclusion and equity, in my vision, because technology is not neutral. Either is pushing in one direction or in another, and often could create well-known problems. Could be even deteriorated by the digitalization in terms of access, because if you need to be sure in terms of access to quality digital education content. The Commission is doing a lot of effort to ensure some standard. What does it mean? Because there is plenty of resources all over the world, but only a few, according to certain criteria, are quality digital education content. So who can get access to this content? We have to be careful. A last point I would make also for adult learning, because we are now focusing on formal education, but there are the digitalization is affecting almost, but not all sectors of economy. So if somebody is not exposed to digital skills, they are potentially in the danger to be completely excluded. And again, this is social-wise. So sometimes the digitalization has to be taken from an economic perspective, but also from a social perspective and in terms of rights. So it's quite complex. And for me, the lesson is really to combine top-down and bottom-up approaches to be sure that we have distributed ownership, and we don't forget anyone behind in this process.
That's very well said. Ms. Terras, I would like to come back to also what I asked Brolpito. We've seen recently that the Scandinavian countries have been banned like digital technologies from schools. However, like especially also as Bitkom, we see also huge potentials in using new technologies like AI in the education system to maybe have a more individual education to better react to the needs. So what is your take on it, and what would be maybe your recommendations also for member states how to make use of these new technologies?
Yeah, so of course that's a complex issue, as it was just said, and there are many contra-argumentation by the psychologists and so on. But coming to the technology in the classroom, I think you can take it out of the classrooms, but does it somehow help children? How does that help children really to 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 learn how to live with them? Because once the school is over, they walk out of the school and they go home, and that's basically the main. The problem is the entertainment in our smartphones and in our laptops. That's the problem. The problem is not so much the screen or technology in itself as an tool for educating or to bringing children together or creating platforms or the content creation for the teachers. that's the screen in itself, or the digital solution or e-solution for the class teachers. I don't think it's somehow to be blamed. It's more the question that how you use it. Children also have to learn how to use them, and the parents are quite often not always able to support from their side either. I mean, it's not only we have to learn as adults to have this kind of more disciplined way, or to push ourselves how we use technology in that correct and supportive way. So of course it's when we talk about the digitalization, the classroom, we are not talking in absolute terms. I mean, it doesn't mean that the children are only in the screens. We just say that it's just one option next to the paper or next to the hands-on options, which are in the toolbox for the teacher. So as the digitalization happens everywhere, I don't think, at least in Estonia, we have taken the, in general, stance that it's rather better to teach children to be knowledgeable and skillful with the technology, also psychologically, also mentally, also how to use them in the way that they wouldn't harm themselves. That's still better to do it in the classroom than leave it somewhere in outside the education. So that's why we have taken that that position that it doesn't maybe that it would help more. It's the same way like that we have cars. That car is also dangerous. There are many accidents, and it's not healthy to use car too much because you should also walk. But first of all, you have to have driving license. You have to learn the rules. You have to learn how to use it in a safe way. So we would see all that digitalized tools in the classroom the same way, that it's neutral. It's not good or bad. It's more about the knowledge you give, how to use them in the best and safe way.
We are almost reaching the end, but Mr. Holthuisv, do you want to react quickly to that, or can I, shall I proceed already to the closing question? Because I would also give you the opportunity to share maybe your stance on digital technologies in schools. We proceed. Okay. It was very insightful, but before I let you go and enjoy the, at least in process, sunny day, I would like to ask one last question, and it would be nice if you could really briefly answer it, but I would be interested in how do you envision the future of the education system? What would be your ideal picture? Maybe very briefly, and yeah, whoever wants to start.
I could start, for example, just to, I expect a blended future with, education remain, however, a human, with a human-centric approach. It's my expectation. So we need to take advantage, but keeping the teachers at the heart, because schools are is a place for new skills, but also to make to grow up, to help to grow up. So even if in new classes and in the new generation, the teachers play an important role. So let's blend, let's put the hands on it, let's experiment in a safe way AI, for example, but under the supervision of competent teachers. And this is the importance also of the digital competence of the teachers, that they are in the classroom and they have to manage these different learning environments, real and virtual and blended.
If I may, I subscribe. I'm not going to repeat what was just said. That's the way how I want to see it, and it's also the motivation, mental health, physical health, technology. Everything should be in a complex. So education is really a complex. The digitalization is not standalone topic outside the other activities. And as was it said, I want to underline that it must be student-centric and the teachers become even more important than ever, not giving the facts and knowledge, but as coaches and to give the guidance and to connect the different kind of wisdom.
Absolutely, from my side, I mean, digital education is a top priority for all of us as we listen today, and it has to be inclusive, there has to be quality, teachers have to be competent and motivated, and nobody should be left behind, because Europe has to lead also in the area of digital education, introduction of digital technologies for the future to be sustainable and competitive. So many thanks for putting this at such a high stake today. Thanks.
And thank you very much, because like all the three statements were a perfect summary of the discussion, and they all included necessary, like very important takeaways for us. So thank you very much to like our excellent panelists who shared their insights here today, and also thank you for the audience who followed that discussion. And with this said, I would like to hand over to Nora again, who will introduce like the next program point.